Immigration has become even more of a hot-button issue, and it's causing thousands of people across the country to take to the streets protesting the president's policies. Over the weekend, people demonstrated in dozens of cities demanding that the government reunite all the families that have been separated at the border. Now, under a court order, the federal government has until the end of the month to do just that, but it's unclear whether that will or even can happen. The government isn't even providing up-to-date numbers about all the families that were split apart. Last week, it said about 500 kids were returned to their families, leaving 2,000 children in custody, but we haven't had an update. But some numbers we are clear about are the poll numbers, and they show that the majority of people are against Republican policies in this regard. Only 27% support separating families at the border, 79% want the Dreamers to have a path to citizenship, and only 39% want a wall on the Mexican border. Plus, with the midterm elections getting closer, this is sure to be a big issue at the polls, and it could help Democrats. Here's Politico's take on it. Quote, a series of court rulings expected in the coming weeks on Dreamers as well as separated migrant families will crank up the heat on Republican lawmakers and underscore their inability to govern when it comes to immigration. Quote, this is certainly a setback today, but it's not the end. That from Congressman John Faso. You know him. He's the New York Republican in the 19th District who told Politico last week after a Republican immigration bill failed in the House. He continued, the issue is not going to go away, especially if they can't pass anything. It's not going to go away. Look, Trump initiated the separation policy. We know people are opposed to the policy. But there's another poll that we didn't show from CBS a couple of weeks ago that says about half of Americans think that people who are stopped at the border, whether they're families or individuals, should just be immediately deported back to where they come from, which gives you some idea of where the strength is on the Republican side and maybe why President Trump did so well with white women. We know he certainly did well with white men in the 2016 election. Given where we are with immigration right now, who is this a bigger winner for, Republicans or Democrats, as we approach the fall? You've seen the numbers.
The numbers show it's a bigger winner for Democrats, and I think it should be a big winner for Democrats because there's a number of factors beyond the poll numbers, which you mentioned, which are clear. The other big factor here is that Republicans are in control of Washington, D.C., and they have been for 2 years. So if immigration is an issue you care about and Americans do, who do you blame for not getting anything done? Almost regardless of whether you want the wall bill or you want families not separate or you want to deal with DACA, it's Republicans who didn't get it done. And let's think about it. This bill that John Faso was commenting on, that went down in flames. Most Democrats supporting it and Republicans against it. So Republicans have not stood up and dealt with this key issue. That makes it a winning issue for Democrats in the midterm election. And the numbers obviously show that where the Democrats stand on the issue, the Democratic voters stand with them. And by the way, so don't most of the American people when you're up at 69 or whatever that number was % who oppose the separation. You know, so as much as Donald Trump is trumpeting that, you know, sorry for the pun, is trumpeting that, you know, it wasn't his idea to separate. That's not something that's resonated. So I think from almost any perspective, this one is a winner for Democrats. And the issue is, can you get it to stick in the 1 or 2 most important issues list versus get pushed down, which is what Republicans are trying to do.
Does that only hold true if you keep it to those 3 issues that we just had on the board? DACA, separating families, and path to citizenship, those things?
First of all, Trump has said he wants this to be the midterm issue, which I think Democrats welcome. And I think it's more visceral than that. I think what started to leak out, first of all, 522 separated children under zero tolerance were put back with their parents because they were still with Border Patrol within this first 72 hours. Last week, in the beginning of last week, there were 2,053. At the end of last week, there were 2,047 still separated. Those are the numbers we have from Health and Human Services. There are thousands more that are coming out. And what you're going to have between now and November is what we've had for the last 2 weeks. That first, ProPublica 2 weeks ago had this tape. This week, Rachel Maddow and Vice had tapes of crying children. These are going to be leaking out. Basically, we've had propaganda coming out from Border Patrol so far. They can only control so much, so long. For the next 2 to 3 months, we're going to have videos leaking, disgruntled employees leaving, sending stuff out. And this hit the American psyche. And you know that's why Trump signed the executive order without any plan in place. I think that this is going to be a big player in the midterm elections, and it's galvanized people. You had over 200,000 people show up in March. I mean, on a hot summer day in over 700 places around the country, you had 700 people, including a congresswoman, get arrested in the Capitol building. So this is galvanizing people.
It is galvanizing. Has entered the American psyche. But Jeannie, you know as well as I do, the American psyche is fickle. People have a short attention span. They tend to move on from one thing to the other pretty quickly. And let's be honest, certainly people who focus on one particular right-leaning network aren't going to hear a whole lot about the votes that went through in Congress. How do Democrats keep this in the national psyche, to keep this as a winning issue?
Well, they've got to keep talking about it. They have to keep demonstrating. They have to keep pushing for votes in Congress. They have to keep, to Amy's point, they have to keep talking about the victims here. And I think a case also has to be made, and we talked about this last week, that a lot of what is being talked about a crisis on the border in terms of a rush of illegal immigrants coming to the border has been absolutely made up from numerically from the time he descended down those steps in Trump Plaza. There's a crisis at the border now because you're separating families and children. But the idea that we have an illegal immigration crisis from Mexico is absolute bunk. It is down to 0%. And that is something the administration hasn't wanted to talk about because they want to keep making the case that this is a crisis that has to be dealt with, and the way to deal with it is the wall. So we have to also be honest about the fact that what we are pretending is a crisis is not a crisis at all.
Amy,
I just have to say, I love his new line the last 2 days. That ICE has liberated towns on Long Island. I mean, and he said it twice, as if, you know, these gang members, every migrant child is an incoming gang member, when the actual number is 56 out of 250,000, which is 0.02%, not 2%, but 0.02%. So, yes, I mean, you can look, we know the number of lies that Trump tells each day.
You have a list going.
I happen to have a list of those. And in the last 2 weeks, he's actually scaled it up even more so than any time since he's taken office. But this is not getting through to the American people in the way he hopes. With his base, yes. But
very, very quickly, because we'll revisit this in a few minutes. The Abolish ICE campaign, we've seen some of the movement. We saw it at the rallies. Is that a winner or a loser for Democrats?
I think it's an issue that appeals to the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. You've seen some establishment Democrats who haven't jumped on it. So I do
But doesn't
think
it just give Republicans an opportunity to say they're soft on borders, they want open borders?
Yeah, they're going to say that either way, though. So I think all in all, it doesn't matter. But let's not forget also the vote in Mexico for the new president that just occurred over the weekend. That's a big development as well, and we've seen Donald Trump has been talking to him as well.
Do you think Abolish ICE is a winning issue?
you know, I know ICE very well from keeping track in my book, and they've been separating children all over this country and doing things that are, to me, like Gestapo-type tactics, these raids at employers and everything. They need to be reined in, and 19 of their own employees, senior employees last week, wrote a letter to Secretary Nielsen saying they should be eliminated. So I think at the very least they need much better to revise their rules.
Yeah, I just think reform ICE would be a better, saying abolish ICE is almost like saying abolish the police department. It opens you up to an argument that you're not for public safety, which I think is a delicate dance. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, it is getting ugly out there. Protests, confrontations, Trump administration officials denied service and shouted down, aggressive and controversial policies by the left wing of the Democratic Party, and all of that could add up to trouble for the Democrats, or will it help them?